What Happened to You by Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. By what happened to you, I always thought that they meant like, what happened to your arm or leg? It looks really bad. Or like, what happened to you? Did you lose weight? You look so different. It's not like that. I guess to get direction 1 out of the way. Direction 1 is basically who I recommend this book to. Sometimes authors will have their own direction 1, and I always find myself agreeing with it. The author said this book is for anyone with a mother, father, partner, or child who has experienced trauma. If you've ever had labels like people pleaser, sabotager, disruptive, argumentative, can't hold the job, or bad at relationships, this book is for you. Or if you simply want to understand better yourself or others. But sometimes intense and disturbing concepts can be alarming and challenging at times. It always seemed to me like one of the greatest humanitarian focuses of Oprah was always working with past experiences of trauma, almost like with Bill Gates and climate change, although I don't think Gates was talking about climate change decades before leaving Microsoft. With over 60 combined years of experience talking about trauma, the brain, resilience, and healing, the authors hope to deliver valuable conversation and stories to illuminate the science that underlies it all. The language and concepts in this book translate the work of thousands of clinicians and researchers in fields ranging from genetics to anthropology to epidemiology. And Perry said that the title signifies a shift in perspective of the past to shape our current functioning, asking what happened to you instead of what's wrong with you. But welcome back to my channel. My name is Samuel, and I want to make self-growth normal. If you want to make self-growth normal, because I don't want to do it alone, then make sure to smash that like button. Children are born with this innate sense of wholeness. By the way, 130 million children are born every year. That's 10.8 million a month. That's 2.7 million a week. That's almost 400,000 a day. That's almost 16,000 an hour. That's 268 per minute. Per second, 4.5 babies. That's a lot of babies. The thing is though, some children are they're born into circumstances where they just experience pain after trauma. Over time, they begin to ache. They begin to lack the ability to set a standard for what they deserve. And when that lack isn't addressed, violence, self-sabotage, promiscuity, and or addiction tend to take place. And that's a lot of violence, self-sabotage, promiscuity, and addiction. Maybe not as much as there are babies, but imagine how many babies there would be if none of them experienced it. This is not to make light of the situation. In fact, I'd call it more of a catastrophe than a situation, but it can be very powerful. As some say in self-help, it can be either the reason you do or don't get where you want to be. A little about what I noticed with the authors in the audio version. It seems like explanations of how we are raised and what it does to our sense of self, stress response systems, scientific explanation. For example, just about all of these are really left to Perry. Oprah seems to be more of the storyteller here, explaining herself where the explanations are translated most into real life experiences. By the way, there's a very conversational tone here. Like you will hear in the audio version one of them talking, and the other one, usually Oprah, pauses him occasionally to clarify what Perry was saying in like a very universal way. This isn't just unconventional, but I can't help thinking that it takes plenty of skill and teamwork to do this without driving the listener insane. I was fine with it. I mean, it didn't really happen that often, and she didn't interrupt him or anything. To a baby, skin-to-skin touch, the scent of a parent, the sound and sight of his or her both's caregiving, the response of their actions, that becomes love, and it shapes the brain of the baby. The only reason that this is so important is that the capacity to love is at the core of the success of humankind. I mean, we've made it this far. Aside from maybe our desire to be important, the sex urge, and man's ability to think, not in that order really, it's because we are able to form effective groups. I really like when Dr. Perry said that all functioning in the brain is state dependent, and he went over like the states of active, calm, alert, alarm, and fear. Alarm to me is where it got interesting because that's where like the lower systems of the brain, those are the ones that begin to dominate our functioning, and because of that, it's like we don't really have that much control of ourselves. Our conversations habitually turn into arguments. Our logic erodes into emotional attacks. We commonly say or do things that we regret, and we act more immature. It's like you can't solve problems, and you can't focus on the moment. And when people are in extended states of like fear and stress, they get stuck in this state. There are plenty of people who actually live in states of fear and alarm, and it's like that takes them over. What happened to them, right? I also found it really interesting what Oprah said about like the two lenses of viewing what happened to you, like the scientific explanation and the daily actions, multiple actions that we take to reflect on the trauma. I also found it really interesting, this study that Perry went over that concluded that the child who only has 2 months of really bad experiences ends up worse than the one who has 12 because of the timing at which those experiences took place. There's a section in the chapter connecting the dots with this diabetic 6-year-old girl named Tyra in a hospital who they don't know why she's there. They don't know what happened that she's in the hospital. Why are these doctors so puzzled? It's diabetes. What more is there to it than that? I mean, it's medical. There's a lot. So when Perry was talking to her, because, they decided we gotta have like a psychologist or something in here, he noticed something that none of the other doctors noticed. Something which the doctors heard so often that they just tuned it out. When Tyra heard it, it really triggered her. As it turns out, that's what triggered the insulin spikes. That's strange, you would never expect. I also feel like this is very helpful, like if you're a specialist and your type of specialist can't seem to figure out what's going on, maybe another type can. Maybe the problem was misdiagnosed at hand and it takes a whole other skill set or lens of skill development to correct it by noticing what wasn't noticed before. This is definitely not a lesson that was really highlighted in the book, but I certainly found it interesting, and if you want more info on it, I definitely recommend checking out Range by David Epstein. This book, I have to admit, is far, far, far more on the scientific end of things than I was expecting it to be, and there was so much more Perry than Oprah. Now, granted, on the front cover of the book, it says his name before hers, but on Audible, it says her name before his. Is that because it's Oprah? I don't know. I don't get it. We're so used to calling her Oprah that we just, many of us just address her by her first name. We address Oprah by her first name like we address presidents by their last names. But if you're expecting a lot of Oprah, I guess I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off here. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. You may be a little bit disappointed because a lot of Oprah in What Happened to You, that is just not what we're going to get in this economic climate. That's not how things work. I'm kidding. The economy has nothing to do with Oprah. Here comes all the comments about how Oprah is like a demon worshiper who wants to destroy the lower class by swallowing the conniving machine elves at the bottom of the Honolulu volcano and causing irreversible damage to the oatmeal industry. The stories remain captivating, however. One of them about a mother who got incredibly worried about her children. It's almost like she got so worried about them that she was kind of neglecting them. My girlfriend and I are watching this crazy show called Bates Motel. There's this like super famous movie this horror movie called Psycho, I think from the 60s, and this show is like a contemporary sequel, something I've never seen before, of that book. No spoilers here, but there's a mom and her son, and the mom owns this motel, but they rely abnormally more on each other than it would make sense for them to. There is a lot of really weird stuff that happens in that show, and I would say that the strangest thing about it is, not that I'm judging, but strange in like a peculiar way, I guess, the relationship between the mom and her son. And again, a lot of really weird stuff happens on that show, so that should be saying a lot. It would make more sense for them not to care as much about each other as they did. Like, what happened to them, right? What are they protecting each other from, though? I also like what Perry and Oprah were saying about dissociation and daydreaming. I did that all the time when I was in school. And I can never, ever focus. School can be amazing, though. But at least, like, publicly, I don't think it's set up for everyone in this country. Because in my school in South Africa, the girls there are brilliant. You've met many of them, but they all come from challenged, traumatized backgrounds, and we had to train our teachers to understand that daydreaming or dissociation is actually good for them. It's an expected coping mechanism when you're raised in an environment where there's inescapable chaos and minimal support or other ways to keep yourself regulated. Not that I was raised in an environment like that, but like, a Chevy Suburban family with 4 kids. One can only imagine. Side note, because there was a point where they were talking about like divorces, and I also thought about this. I don't really think my parents' divorce affected me as much as the authors said that it typically does. In many strange ways, that I still don't know how to explain. I think it's actually caused me to become a better person over time, but maybe I was following ideas in this book without noticing it. I mean, this isn't the first book, this isn't the first self-help book I've checked out. And if you're watching this, chances are it's probably not the first self-help book you've checked out either. In the chapter, Our Brains, Our Biases, Our System, I learned that there is a study called Traumatology. It's about the study of trauma. It's a very young study, however, because we're just figuring out now, let alone the fact that, but how trauma permeates every single area of life. It echoes through generations across families, communities, cultures, institutions, and societies in super complex ways. Trauma can affect your genes, your white blood cells, your gut, your heart, your lungs, your brain. Your thinking, behaving, parenting, teaching, coaching, consuming, creating, I don't know why Wyatt Perry added these words, but prescribing, arresting, and sentencing. There are plenty of people with trauma who, they get arrested and they're sentenced and they get prescribed medications, I guess, but they're not really areas of life or aspects of life. But we can go on and on. We could probably go on as long as SpongeBob can about the list of what he's learned in boating school. I guess. That was probably a terrible analogy. The next chapter is called Relational Hunger in the Modern World. This one is a lot about where the world is going relationally, and it's kind of scary. For example, I don't know how they quantified this, but studies are showing that there has been a significant decrease in measures of empathy. The typical college-age adult is 30% less empathetic. How do you measure that? And more self-absorbed than 20 years ago. One person conducted a study of psychopathology in American college students over the last 30 years, and they suggested that it's related to cultural shifts in extrinsic goals such as materialism and status, and away from intrinsic goals like community, meaning in life, and affiliation. Perry said that disconnection and loneliness in our society are playing a major role in increased anxiety, sleep problems, substance abuse, and depression that we've been seeing. The societal crisis of
I have to manage all this novelty.
What is just something that it breaks my heart, let alone this chapter. The scariest, most informative book I can recommend with a little bit more on this topic is The Shallows by Nicholas Carr, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. Everyone who checks out that book is just completely astonished by it. We know that too much time in front of a screen too. We know that it doesn't replace family and friends or a coach or a teacher, but we create policies to adapt to it anyway. But the scariest thing about all of this is that the speed at which we invent all of this technology, it outpaces our ability to understand the impact of the inventions. And I really wish that on the news and all these places where people get the information they get every day, there was more information on stuff like this. When I say I want to make self-growth normal, that's what I'm talking about. I wish that was in shows like Stranger Things and Game of Thrones and Bates Motel, I guess. I wish you would hear about it in popular music, just everywhere. I wish it were normal to do that. I wish it were normal to learn more about ourselves and what we create. So when I talk about making self-growth normal, that is what I'm talking about. And again, if that's something that you're interested in, I would definitely recommend hitting that like button because it helps so much with getting these ideas out. I feel like I don't say this enough in my videos. It's really important, literally, it is very important. In the last chapter, What We Need Now, maybe just to close up the summary, there's something that Oprah said in this chapter that is just gold. Until you heal the wounds of your past, you will continue to bleed. The wounds will bleed through you and stain your life through alcohol, through drugs, through sex, through overworking. You have to have the courage to pull out of the wound and begin to heal yourself. Quotes. If we want to understand the oak, into the acorn we must go. Given love, the unloved can become loving. We feel better with the certainty of misery than the misery of uncertainty. Children are not born resilient, they are born malleable. The saddest aspect of life right now is that science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom. You can't give what you don't get. Direction 2. If you like this book, I would recommend checking out really anything by Brené Brown. Probably more than anything, I guess, Daring Greatly. What Happens to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. If you guys buy anything through the links in the description, then I get commission, which helps me build this channel and keep making these videos. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification whenever I drop new videos, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere and I will see you then.